Have you ever wondered how long the shortest war in history lasted? A month? A week? A single day? Get ready for a story that sounds almost unbelievable. We're talking about a war that was over in less time than it takes to watch a movie. In fact, it was over in less time than it takes to watch this video. Welcome to the incredible story of the Anglo-Zanzibar War of 1896, a conflict that lasted a mere 38 minutes. To understand this blink-and-you'll-miss-it war, we need to travel back to the late 19th century. Picture the island of Zanzibar, off the coast of modern-day Tanzania. It was a jewel of the Indian Ocean, a vibrant hub of trade, especially in valuable spices like cloves, and tragically, a major center for the slave trade. For centuries, the Sultanate of Zanzibar had been a powerful regional force, but the late 1800s was the era of the scramble for Africa, and the mighty British Empire had its eyes set on controlling this strategic island. By 1890, Britain had established a protectorate over Zanzibar. This meant that while the Sultan was still the official ruler, he couldn't make any major decisions without Britain's approval. The British had their own preferred Sultan, Hamad bin Thuwani, who was cooperative and friendly to their interests. For 5 years, things were relatively stable. The British were happy, their trade routes were secure, and Sultan Hamad played by their rules. But everything changed on August 25th, 1896, when Sultan Hamad suddenly died. Now, the British had already handpicked Hamad's successor, a man named Hamud bin Mohammed. They believed he would continue to be just as compliant. But there was a problem. Another man, Sultan Hamad's cousin, Khalid bin Barghash, had other ideas. Khalid saw this as his golden opportunity to seize power. He believed the throne was rightfully his, and he wasn't about to let the British tell him what to do. He represented a faction within Zanzibar that was tired of British interference and wanted to restore the Sultanate's true independence. So, what did Khalid do? Within hours of Sultan Hamad's death, he made his move. With the support of about 2,800 loyal soldiers and palace guards, he occupied the royal palace, a magnificent complex right on the waterfront of Zanzibar's stone town. He barricaded the buildings, armed his men with rifles and even some older cannons, and declared himself the new Sultan of Zanzibar. It was a bold and direct challenge to the authority of the British Empire. The British consul in Zanzibar, Basil Cave, was not amused. He immediately sent a message to Khalid, delivering a clear ultimatum: stand down and leave the palace by 9 colonial AM on August 27th, or face the consequences. The British saw Khalid's actions as a rebellion, a direct threat to their control over the region. They couldn't allow this act of defiance to go unpunished, as it might inspire other anti-colonial movements. To back up their threat, the British had a formidable naval presence anchored in the harbor, just a stone's throw from the Sultan's palace. Rear Admiral Harry Rawson commanded a squadron of 5 modern warships: the HMS Philomel, the HMS Raccoon, the HMS Sparrow, the HMS Thrush, and the powerful flagship, the HMS St. George. These weren't just any ships. They were floating platforms of destruction, armed with state-of-the-art artillery that completely outmatched anything Sultan Khalid had at his disposal. As the deadline approached, the tension in Zanzibar was palpable. Khalid, perhaps underestimating the British resolve or overestimating his own strength, refused to back down. He believed his palace guard could hold off an attack and that the British were just bluffing. He sent a reply to the British consul saying, "We have no intention of hauling down our flag, and we do not believe you would open fire on us." He was tragically mistaken. On the morning of August 27th, the city held its breath. The streets were deserted. On one side, you had Sultan Khalid and his 2,800 men huddled inside the wooden palace, their morale high, but their weaponry outdated. They did have one notable asset: the HHS Glasgow, the Sultan's royal yacht, armed with a Gatling gun. It was the pride of the Zanzibari Navy, but it was just a single, lightly armed vessel. On the other side, the Royal Navy ships sat menacingly in the harbor, their guns trained directly on the palace. The final minutes ticked away. At exactly 9:02 AM, with no sign of surrender, Admiral Rawson gave the order. The British warships unleashed a deafening barrage of shellfire. The bombardment was swift, brutal, and incredibly effective. The heavy shells tore through the wooden structure of the palace, reducing it to a blazing inferno of splintered wood and rubble. Chaos erupted inside. The Sultan's old bronze cannons were no match for the modern British artillery and were quickly silenced. The Sultan's yacht, the HHS Glasgow, valiantly tried to engage the British fleet. It fired on the HMS St. George, but its small-caliber shots bounced harmlessly off the British warship's armored hull. In return, the British cruiser aimed its mighty guns at the Glasgow. Within minutes, the royal yacht was sunk, sending its crew scrambling into the water. The Zanzibari resistance on the water was over before it had truly begun. On land, the situation was just as one-sided. The palace was engulfed in flames, and the Sultan's flag, which he had defiantly refused to lower, was shot down. With his primary defense completely annihilated and his palace collapsing around him, Sultan Khalid realized his cause was lost. He fled the burning ruins and sought refuge in the nearby German consulate. The German government eventually granted him asylum and smuggled him out of the country to their territory in East Africa, where he lived in exile. By 9:40 a.m., the shooting had stopped. The smoke began to clear, revealing a scene of utter devastation. The once proud palace was a smoldering ruin. The brief, intense conflict was over. The Anglo-Zanzibar War had lasted just 38 minutes, cementing its place in the Guinness Book of World Records as the shortest war in history. The aftermath was grim. While the British suffered only one minor injury, the Zanzibari side paid a heavy price. An estimated 500 of Sultan Khalid's soldiers and defenders were killed or wounded in the bombardment. The British quickly installed their chosen candidate, Hamud bin Mohammed, as the new Sultan. His reign marked the beginning of the end for the Sultanate's independence. One of his first acts, under pressure from the British, was to officially abolish slavery in Zanzibar, a key long-term goal for the British Empire in the region. So, what does this 38-minute war tell us? It's a stark and brutal illustration of the massive technological and military gap that existed between the European colonial powers and the territories they sought to control. It was a clear message from the British Empire: resistance is futile. The Anglo-Zanzibar War wasn't really a war in the traditional sense of a prolonged struggle between two armies. It was a punitive expedition, a swift and overwhelming show of force designed to crush dissent and reinforce colonial authority. While some might view Khalid's stand as a foolish act of defiance, others see it as a courageous, if doomed, example of African resistance against colonial domination. He challenged one of the most powerful empires the world has ever known. He lost decisively, but his story serves as a powerful reminder of the struggles for sovereignty that took place all across the continent during this era. The shortest war in history is more than just a quirky historical footnote. It's a condensed, dramatic chapter in the complex and often tragic story of colonialism in Africa. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into one of history's most fascinating and briefest conflicts. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey back in time, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell so you won't miss our next historical adventure. See you next time.